Hey guys, are you ready to transform your mind so you can transform your life? Coach Myrna brings you one-on-one coaching and expert guests weekly to help you to grow. Because happiness is the progressive realization of a worthy goal.
Looking for personal growth? Let's do it. Whether you're a garage entrepreneur or IPO ready, Shopify is the only tool you need to start, run, and grow your business without the struggle. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. So whether you're selling superfood smoothies or offering organic omega-3s, Shopify's all-in-one e-commerce platform got you covered. Sign up for $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/transform, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/transform to take your business to the next level today. Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio, podcast, and television show. I'm your host, Life Coach Myrna Young. And sitting in the guest chair today is J.R Martinez, New York Times best-selling author of Full of Heart, My Story of Survival, Strength, and Spirit. And J.R. and I today are going to be talking on the topic, dancing through adversity. Welcome, J.R.
I've never heard anyone use it that way. I like that. That was good.
Yeah. I'm going. That's what we're doing, right? Yeah, so welcome. All right. So if you guys don't know who J.R. Martinez is, let me give you guys a short introduction. J.R.'s life is different than most. He is a burn survivor, Army veteran who went on to win Dancing with the Stars, become a New York Times best-selling author, star in the television series All My Children, and become a keynote speaker at events all over the world. J.R.'s motto is, life is what you make it. He is proof of that. Stay tuned to learn more about J.R.'s story, his work, and how your own path in life is decided by your ability to adapt and overcome. Now, J.R., I know a little bit about your story since, I've been following you on social media and, I've read your bio. You've got an interesting story. I interviewed another Army veteran, Navy SEAL, on the Jason Redmond. I follow him, and he was shocked in the face, each time. So same kind of situation. But can you share your story and all the details so we can set this up for our listeners and those watching on TV?
Yeah, no, thank you for that introduction and thank you for the question. I think, a lot of times when, people ask, me about my life and my story, they assume that I'm going to begin at one point, which was referred to as a tragic day, which was the 5th of April of 2003. But I always tell people, and I know for the sake of time, we don't have as much time to really dive into it, but I always tell people, you can't start my story at the age of 19. Because then you're dismissing all of the things that have shaped me and allowed me to be an individual that was able to overcome a lot of the adversity that I faced at the age of 19 when I had my tragic accident. I always tell people resiliency isn't something that you just decide you suddenly want to have. Resiliency is something that has to be conditioned, has to be exercised, it has to be something worked on. And that's what the previous 19 years of my life did for me. My mother's from Central America. My father's from Mexico, and my father wasn't in my life. He left when I was an infant, essentially, and my mother raised me by herself. And listen, my mother did the best that she could with what she had, yet my mother was a woman that, was also had carrying a lot of trauma and carrying a lot of pain in her heart. And so, unfortunately in my culture, being Latino, that's not something we openly discuss or go and say we're going to go look for help. And of course, my mother as a woman, my mother as a lady that didn't have a lot of resources, didn't have that luxury to be able to do that. And so, but she did the best that she could. And I was born in Louisiana, grew up in Arkansas, graduated high school in Georgia, moved around a lot, witnessed my mother, fall into some abusive relationships, and, which weren't obviously healthy for anybody involved. And, it was, but there was a lot of like, despite a lot of hardship, there was a lot of positive. There was a lot of deep appreciation and perspective, and allowing me to understand that what I had, even though it wasn't the things that I wanted in regards, like I wanted the video gaming system. I wanted the new shoes. I wanted this because I was comparing to my peers.
Yeah.
But my mother gave me everything that I needed. And when I looked at life and I had that perspective, I remember my mother would sit down with me at the table in our apartment and she would say, okay, here's my check. And then she was like, and here are the bills. And she said, now let's figure this out. And we would sit there and I would do math with her. And again, she's like, okay, now this is how much is left over. Now we got to account for this, this, and this, and this. And it was great for me to be able to have that insight. And I think as a parent, as much as I have now, I like to believe that I'm in a different place than where I was in my youth. And I'm creating a different life for my kids than I had. I think we have to be very careful as parents that we get caught up in like, I want to give my kids more than what I had, but you're also taking out the very thing that made you become the person that you are, the great parts about you, the parts that people love, the parts that you love about yourself. And so for me, I try to give perspective to my children. My daughter is going to be 12 years old. My son's still young, so he doesn't quite get it yet, but there's a balance, right? As much as my kids are in a bubble, I also want to expose them and say, hold on, let's think about this. Let's talk about this. Let's look at this financially. Let's look at, so my kids can have that. And I had a lot of responsibility. I had to be very independent as a child. And granted, my kids, yeah, I mean, I want them to have some independency as well. I want them to have some responsibility as well. It's not just daddy and mommy will just do for you, and that's just how easy it comes to you. No, you got to work for it. You got to earn some of this stuff. And so, all of those things, and I know I just took up a lot of time, but essentially all of those things help shape me and prepare me for the 5th of April of 2003, when at that point, I'd only been in the Army 7 months, straight out of high school, and 19 years old, and driving a Humvee through a city called Karbala, when the front left tire of the Humvee that I was driving ran over a roadside bomb. It immediately exploded. I was trapped inside. And listen, I was completely conscious for the 5 minutes that I was trapped inside of this Humvee, and I was, screaming and yelling at the top of my lungs. And anybody that you talk to, including Jason, who I know, I spent some time with Jason, who is the other JR, but he will tell you, along with anybody else that has had a similar experience, that in these moments, time just slows down. Everything slows down, and you have time to think about your life, to think about the situation, the moment. It just does. And I was no different. And I can tell you that over the course of those 5 minutes of being trapped in this Humvee, fighting for my life, I mean, I felt this excruciating pain, and I just felt these moments where I would say to myself, I'm going to die. I'm going to lose my life at the age of 19 in this place, in this way. And then again, that's where the 19 years comes into play, because I would tell myself, no, this can't be it. I can't give up. And I just got to continue to show up and continue to fight. And luckily, I was pulled out of the Humvee. It started the medevac process. I ended up in San Antonio, Texas, where I spent almost 3 years recovering. And, and as you can imagine, I tell people, 19 years old, when you come out of a coma, and the reality is you've lost both of your identities, meaning the identity that I knew for 19 years of my life. When I looked at myself, I recognized this person. I lost that. I didn't recognize the person that I saw in the mirror anymore. Also, the identity that I was starting to create for myself in the military, of being of service, wearing this uniform, of giving back in this way. And they told me that I wasn't allowed to stay in the Army. As you can imagine, for anybody, but especially as a 19-year-old who is a 19-year-old by itself with all the extra stuff, is already having a hard time trying to figure out who they are, where they fit in, what role they play in society and their environment that they're in. But then you throw these two components on top of that. Well, that makes it even more complicated.
Oh, wow. I'm so glad that you started your resiliency from your mom being a single mom. I'll tell you, the single mom is a hard life, but if you do it right, what you do is get children like yourselves. I mean, think of the difference of someone that, comes from wealthy parents where everything is given to them and, they don't think they need to work for anything. Based on, your mom, doesn't sound like you had any other brothers and sisters, like you were the man of the house, right?
Well, so that's the unique thing about my story. So in order to respect and appreciate my story, I tell people you have to appreciate and respect my mother's. And what that means is that, listen, there's a lot of differences and people that disagree, but my mother was an immigrant. My mother did come to this country looking for a better life. My mother did leave 2 children behind with my grandmother and the rest of her family. And the goal was to come here and honestly just make enough money to be able to go back to El Salvador and take care of her kids. And then my little, charismatic dad snuck into the picture. And, obviously I changed a lot of that. And then my mother, just kind of felt guilty taking that away from me because this was my country. And so I do have an older sister. I mean, one of my sisters passed away when I was younger, but I do have an older sister, but she was born and she was raised in El Salvador. And I was born and raised in the United States. And so even that is something that I think a lot of people can't grasp, right? Because, my sister is looking at my life and saying, God, you have it made. And yes, absolutely. In comparison to a lot of the living conditions and where she grew up, yes, things were very different for me. But I also had my own challenges, and there were different challenges than she was experiencing. And I looked at her and I would say, yeah, but you have like the aunts and the uncles and the cousins and the grandma, and you have everybody, and it's just me.
Like the trailblazers. Right?
Yeah, and it's like our mom is always working, and I have to be home by myself all the time. Like, so it was like this 2 very different worlds. And so as much as I have an older sister, I was raised as an only child, and so yes, I did have to be the man of the house.
Man of the house. I kind of got that when she was, at the table saying, this is what we need to do. You're like the man of the house. Oh, by the way, we don't have a similar story, but I was born in Guyana. My mom left her 3 children with with her mom in Guyana and went to Canada to do the same thing. And I was, we lived with my grandmother for 6 years. She was able to send for all of us at the same time, but it's the same kind of passage.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my mom is an immigrant too. And I will tell you that the children of immigrants are very hardworking.
We are. Yeah.
Hardworking. They don't take anything for granted because you got to start from scratch and you got to work. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, listen, my mother taught me a lot. I mean, when you talk about like that resiliency and the training that I received and how a lot of that was instilled from my mother and also obviously the environments that I grew up in, my mother did instill a lot in me. I mean, there was a lot of things that my mother said or did that maybe the intent was not to teach me a lesson, but or to get me thinking about something. So, for example, like I remember my mother one time, my mother was in an abusive relationship for a while and, verbally and physically. And I remember it was kind of a reoccurring event where, Friday, Saturday night, he's sitting around drinking or they'd be out and then something would piss him off and trigger him. And he'd come home and he'd put his hands on my mom and I would call 911. They'd take him away. He'd be gone for a few days. And then he'd be back at the house. I mean, that was kind of a little bit of a cycle that we were a part of. And I remember one day my mother, after one of these incidents, just smiling, carrying on, like life is good. And I asked her, I said, why do you smile so much? Like, I know you can't be happy, right? Like this man just put his hands on you. Like he's gone to jail again. Like what is there to be happy about? And my mother said something at the time. I think it was just her way. My mother's a survivalist. She's had to survive her entire life. And she said something that to me just really encompasses sort of that survival mentality, survivor's mentality. And she said, I smile to invite the blessings. I smile to invite any good thing that's around us that potentially is coming to us. I smile to receive it. If I'm not smiling, then I'm not able to receive that. Now, what she's telling me, and of course it didn't make sense to me at the time, but as I got older, I realized what she's telling me is I'm focusing on what I can control. And what I can control is how I show up in this moment, despite what may have just happened.
Shout out to Claritin for supporting this episode and providing us with samples. This allergy season have been tough for me. The pollen number was the highest it's been in over 3 years. My nose was stuffed up, then it was running. I had the awful nasal drip in my throat and the sneezing. I was miserable. Luckily for those of us who live with symptoms of allergies, we can live Claritin Clear with Claritin D. Designed for serious allergy sufferers, Claritin D has 2 powerful ingredients in just one pill that relieve your allergy symptoms and decongest your nose so you can breathe better. If you're ready to live life as if you don't have allergies, it's time to live Claritin Clear. Fast and powerful relief is just a quick trip away. Ask for Claritin D at your local pharmacy counter. You don't even need a prescription. Go to Claritin.com right now for a discount so you can live Claritin Clear. Remember, use as directed for relief of nasal congestion, runny nose, sneezing, and itchy nose due to allergies. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Usually, improvements don't come overnight, but once in a while, one small fix can catapult you to the next level. If your commerce platform is holding your business back, you owe it to yourself to see what Shopify can do for you. Whether you're a garage entrepreneur or IPO ready, Shopify is the only tool you need to start, run, and grow your business without the struggle. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. So whether you're selling satin sheets from Shopify's in-person POS system or offering organic olive oil on Shopify's all-in-one e-commerce platform, you're covered. And once you've reached your audience, Shopify has the internet's best converting checkout to help you turn them from browsers to buyers. Sign up for $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/transform, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/transform to take your business to the next level today.
Now, there is something very beautiful and deeply positive and, about that approach. And that is definitely a mindset that I still incorporate into my life today. However, this is the flip side of that, right? And the flip side of that is, well, okay, if you're not really doing the work from the inside out, right? They always say happiness is an inside job. And if you're really trying to work on yourself and find true peace and true happiness in your own heart and doing that, starting with yourself, I don't care how much you smile and I don't care how many blessings come to you, because in some cases, you're not able to really see that they're blessings, or in some cases, you're not able to actually allow those blessings to have longevity and sustain those blessings and see them in your life and see them for what they are. And the reason I say that is because I saw that in my mother. My mother got to a point in her life where she would just smile, and it was the way she had conditioned herself to smile to invite the blessings. But in reality, in many instances, because she was a hurt woman, she wasn't really seeing the blessings for what they really were.
The blessings weren't coming in, right?
And
they're out there in the vortex, right?
They were coming in, but she wasn't able to see them for what they really were. And And so I think that's the thing for me as a parent and as an adult now. Yes, I smile a lot and I smile to invite the blessings, and I focus on what I can control. But at the same time, I'm doing a lot of work on myself. So when those blessings do present themselves, I'm able to say, that is a blessing. And I'm able to hold on to that blessing and actually receive that blessing for what it is, versus just trying to use this sort of idea and this approach is kind of like if you're drowning and you're just trying to reach up to a branch just to give you some air, but you're never really doing the work to be able to really pull yourself completely out of that water.
That's good. That's good. Just this morning, I was reading a book and it was talking about luck. And he was saying that you smile to bring in the positive and the law of attraction. And I understand that part, but you're right. You've got to smile outwardly and smile inwardly because you are doing the work.
Yep.
So, which leads me to my next question that I have here. In reading your story, you talked about, how you were a very good looking man. And when the first time you saw yourself in the mirror, I assume you just said woke up from a coma. I'm not sure if it's woke up from a coma or when they took off the bandages, that you were very angry. And that changed when you had to help a burn victim and maybe offer him some words of encouragement. And you said that changed your trajectory. I mean, I'm not sure if we're going to go back to the smile incident or what you're saying that your mom taught you about what you can control. But what exactly did you say to that burn victim that made you feel better? And what do you say to yourself every day when you look into the mirror and still see the evidence of April the 5th,
Yeah,
2003? I think that's what the date is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I came out of it was a coma that I was in for 3 weeks. And when I came out of my coma and saw as I like to say, my new norm and the reality of the degree of the injury, yeah, of course I was in a negative space. And, what it really came down to after being in this space for a few weeks, I ended up having this, deep conversation with my mother and a lot of the staff, because a lot of the medical team that took care of me, yes, they're medical professionals, but they also became friends. It became therapists. It became people that I confided in and cried to, and they would listen and they would be there for me. And they would always, just kind of encourage me that things are going to get better. And they clearly have. And, but when you're in that moment, it's hard to really kind of take those words. But one of the simple things that I did that I realized started to change my approach and sort of the way that I showed up every day. When I woke up and I saw my face in the mirror in the morning, every morning, and had that reminder and how it could easily have triggered me, what I did is I practiced gratitude. And what I mean by that is I found myself, every morning I would wake up and I would find something to be grateful for. I would find okay, my hands once upon a time were like this, like literally like claws, and I could not extend them just because of the burns. It contracts and it tightens the skin, so it limits your range of motion. I couldn't feed myself, bathe myself. I had to learn how to walk again. And so every day there was always something that I could be grateful for. So I could say, oh, maybe these 2 fingers, I'm getting more range of motion back. Oh, you know what? Now I can actually grab the spoon today. Oh, you know what? I actually was able to walk like half a lap more than what I did yesterday. There was always something to be grateful for. Yes. And that simple practice.
And the big one, life.
But the thing was, as much as everyone was grateful that I was alive, I wasn't grateful that I was alive. Because while everybody was like, you're alive, that's great. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I'm alive, but I'm never going to live. And there's a difference between that. You could be alive and not really live. And so I was afraid, yeah, I'm alive. I'm never really going to live. I'm never really going to live my life. And so the focus became, because I didn't know what life I would have, it had to be micro. I had to eliminate this big macro goal and vision I had for myself and just focus today in this moment. And I don't know where people are in their lives right now that are listening to this. But I'm going to tell you, like, a lot of us are going to have to just completely give up on this thing that we've been holding on to, this idea of something that we've always thought that's who we are and that's what we're going to be. And you might have to, in this particular moment, in this stage in your life, say, you know what, forget that for now. I'm just going to shelve that for now. And I'm going to focus on this moment. I'm going to focus on something I'd be grateful for in this moment, because that's the stuff that gets the motor continuing to move. Because if I would have focused on long term, I didn't know what my life was going to be. So why would I spend so much energy on that? So that was something that was instrumental in allowing me to get through every single day and be able to look at myself and say, okay, cool. My scar is healing better. You know, my facial stuff, like everything's getting better. So no big deal. Now, to your question that it seemed like you asked me 45 minutes ago, because I talk so much.
Listen, you are talking. I love conversation. Don't worry about it.
6 months later, I was asked to visit a burn survivor. And, you know, listen, I went into that room and I did not want to go into that room. It felt heavy. It was dark. It didn't feel like a welcoming, warm, inviting room to be in. And I was 20 years old at this point, and I was like, I do not want to go in this room because it feels uncomfortable. And finally, I just had to put myself in the position of that patient and remind myself, when I was in that circumstance, all I wanted was someone to come and visit me. Yeah. So what I did is I walked into the room, I introduced myself, and I asked him 3 questions. I literally asked him his name, where he was from, and what unit he was in the military. And when I tell you that we spoke for about 45 minutes. Now, when I say spoke, we had a conversation for 45 minutes. Now, most people are going to think a conversation has to be, you know, oh, a JR is going to talk for, 50% of the time, and then I have to speak 50% of the time, because that's the true definition of a conversation. We both equally get the same amount of time. And in that interaction that I had with that patient, the definition of a conversation was redefined for me. And what I mean by that is I probably spoke for 20 minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes. That's it. I didn't talk a lot. It was him doing all the talking, but I did more listening. And that is a conversation, ladies and gentlemen. So just be mindful of that. And so when I started to leave the room, I noticed something. He was out of his bed and he was actually turning on the light. He turned on the light above his bed. And then he was opening the curtain. And, listen, as cliche as this may sound, I mean, it was so simple for me that this wasn't a coincidence. This was literally a message and a sign that I had given him some hope, that I had, I was shedding some light on this dark road he was on. And instead of me ignoring that, what I decided to do was I decided every single day to start visiting patients between my own appointments. So I started putting myself in these different hospital rooms with different patients and their family members and just talking to them. And what I discovered after doing this for a few months, I discovered, the thing that I loved about the military was service. I loved to serve. And and this was giving me the opportunity to serve again in a very different way. But I was
still in the military too, because you're talking to,
and I'm still in the military.
Yeah, right.
And so I still am in the military at that time. And so, and that's what I tell people. I was like, when people say I want to start a business or I want to do this or I want to do that, and I'm like, okay, let's get to the root of why you want to do that. Do you want it because you want to impact people? You love the feeling of being able to do this for people. Do you do it because you want the acknowledgement? You want people to to applaud you? And do you do it? What is the reason? Do you do it because you're looking for validation? You're looking for acceptance? What are you doing it for? Right. And when you identify that, because that's the thing you're attached to, that's the identity you're connected to. Not when I do this job at this company, I feel X, Y, and Z, and that's what makes me happy. Well, is it the job or is it the act? And you have to identify those things, because the job could end, right? My Army job ended, but the act of me helping and servicing other people, that didn't have to end. And that is truly how I function till this day. Everything that I do is really operating from a place of trying to serve people.
Yes. That's beautiful. I love that. Oh, I absolutely love that. Where, he was in a dark place, possibly without hope.
Yep.
And he had a conversation. And that's why talk therapy is so profound.
Yeah.
Because when you get things out, it actually does lighten the load. And that is beautiful. And then there's nothing better than seeing someone that's gone through, because that's really what coaching is all about. You help somebody through something that you have already gone through. So that is amazing. I absolutely love that visual.
Well, and what I want people to remember this. When I walked into that patient's room, I was a 20-year-old kid. Remember yourself at 20 years old. Remember what you didn't know. Remember what you put too much thought into, whether it was good or bad. Remember yourself at 20. What makes you think that I was qualified to walk into somebody's room that is dealing with some real trauma in their life at this stage to try to assist this individual? I'm not qualified. Well,
but you are qualified.
I am qualified. And I think that's the thing, is that people need to remember is like, oh, that's just JR's story. No, we're all qualified. The key is you have to be willing, when it feels uncomfortable, to walk into a room because the space in the room doesn't feel welcoming. You still have to walk in. You still have to show up. And through that leaning in practice, you'll identify some things about yourself and about this situation and about the person you're interacting with. And you will more than likely find out the things that you need versus maybe doing so much for that other individual. And so for me, I think that's my focus, is like, hey, listen, like, lean in, ladies and gentlemen. I get it. Things are scary. Things feel uncomfortable. But I was 20 years old and I trusted myself to just go do it. And I did it. And look how rewarding it was. And I can tell you this, everything that I've done since that point in my life has been simply because I've operated from this place of like, I'm just going to lean in and see what happens. And I find myself surprising myself where I'm like, oh, I can do this. I could do this.
I'm going to change the title to Lean In.
Yeah. And so it's just like, stop overthinking things. Listen, I put a lot of emphasis 2-3 months after I was injured, thinking I'm never going to have a job. I'm never going to be able to meet anybody. I'm never going to have a family. I'm never going to be able to, have normal conversation with normal people because no one wants to be, around someone like me that looks like me. I mean, come on. I think you can look at my life and say, oh no, he's accomplished all of those things. I have a beautiful wife. I have a beautiful children, a beautiful family. I'm so blessed. I have a beautiful and amazing career that gives me so much freedom from a time perspective and a financial component. Like I'm able to have great conversation with people. I meet so many great people every single day. Everything that I thought would never happen has happened and has even amplified by 10. I mean, think about that.
I definitely agree. But I'm going to say something to you now, and I'm not blowing smoke. But even though you might say that, maybe your face might make someone uncomfortable, I will tell you that your face projects so much beauty is because you got light coming through you. And that's basically what people see. You've got light coming through you, and that people don't see the scars. They see the light. So,
well, thank you very much for saying that. It actually, when you say that, I really appreciate that and I receive that. It reminds me of, people always ask me the question, JR, you're this person for other people. What motivates you? What inspires you? What replenishes you? And I tell people, I said, I can't just say one thing, right? Obviously, my kids, my family, right? My friends, those things are obviously things that are going to replenish me. But I also put a lot of, I put a lot of myself out into the world, and because I trust that the world, the universe, God is going to give me the things that I need. But I have to be willing to go out and not just sit back like people that say, I wish I wish I could win the lotto. And I'm like, well, get your ass up and go buy a lotto ticket. Like the lotto ticket, a lotto ticket isn't going to get blown into your house with the winning numbers on it. That's not how it works. Like you have, and so I put myself out in the world, and by doing that, I'm opening myself up to the world to say, hey, I need the world to give me something that I need for this moment that I'm in, this space that I'm in, both emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I have been reminded over and 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 over that every time that I do this, the world does give me the things that I need. And when you talked about that light, it reminds me a few years ago when I was traveling home from a speaking engagement, and I had just spoken at this, Fortune 100, company, and felt really good about it. It went really well. But something just triggered me. I don't remember what it was. Something triggered me on the flight, and I just got into deep thought, and it just kind of was like, not the healthiest thinking. And I got off the plane, and I went to my car because I parked it at the airport, and I pulled up to the booth, and I didn't even look at the person, and I handed my ticket out for that person to take it and to pay for parking. And the person grabs the ticket, but holds on to it. So then finally, like, I look up at this person, and it's this, this lady, and this lady says to me, she says, what happened to you?
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, I said, I was burned in a car accident. Just kept it simple. She says, were you in the military? And I said, yes, I was. And she says, was it most of your body? And I said, yes, it was. And she said, can I pray for you? And I was like, yeah, I guess, sure. And so she just kind of quietly said the prayer. She didn't say it out loud. And then I noticed that she started writing. So I'm like, okay, now she's doing the process for me to make the payment and go about my way. But then she hands me a ticket. She hands me a ticket, and it's a parking ticket. That's not the process. She hands me a ticket, and she asked me, she says, are you familiar with Buddhism? And I said, not so much. And she said, okay, within Buddhism, there is a Buddhist called Amitabha. Amitabha represents infinite light, infinite wisdom. When I see you, I see Amitabha. You represent infinite light. You're
giving me chills. Yes, that's beautiful.
And I take this parking ticket, and I'm looking at it. And then I give her my credit card, and then I pay for parking. And then when in the metaphor of life, like you think about it, right? We've all left a parking garage at some point. That arm is up. You can't go through it. I mean, you could, but once I made my payment, the arm went up and I was free to go. But the arm in my thought represents I needed to open myself up to this possibility to receive this blessing from this woman, from a complete stranger. And you think about it, over the course of this 3-minute interaction that we had, I had several opportunities to shut it down. When she asked me, what happened? None of your business. Were you in the military? None of your business. Most of your body? None of your business. Can I pray for you? Absolutely not. Are you familiar with Buddhism? No, and I don't care. You represent, okay, like I could have shut it down so many times, but because I have been conditioned to believe and trust the universe is putting me in spaces for a reason, I open myself up to these interactions, and I end up getting blessed by a complete stranger that now when I have these moments, because I'm a human being and I have these moments, I always tell myself, Amitabha, I represent infinite light. I represent infinite wisdom.
You do. I'm seeing it all over you. Wow, that is so beautiful. And the crazy thing about that story is that you said you weren't even looking at it, but she saw your light.
Yeah.
She didn't look at your face.
Yeah.
That's amazing. She was a spiritual person, and she can actually see, beyond, what's in front of her, because you said you weren't looking at her, and yet she knew you were in the military, even though you told her in a car accident, and she knew you were burnt, most of your body.
Yeah.
So she's actually a very spiritual human being, and she prayed for you. Mm-hmm. And I love that. That is, listen, Yeah, you were here for this purpose. I know a lot of times people don't, they go into their purpose from tragedy and suffering, but, unfortunately, sometimes that is how the good Lord wrote it, and that's how he wrote the story. And look
Yeah.
what you're doing now.
But the thing is that we become, I think, I mean, there's not just one answer to this question, but I think one of the key issues that people run into when people say my life is not really working out the way, and I was like, well, it's because you're blocking something. You're not, we're so stubborn. And I know some people are like, oh, well, I'm not stubborn. My sister, who's a Taurus, because Taurus, they're really stubborn. I'm like, yeah, whatever. How dare you go? We're all stubborn on our own level, right? Like, we're all stubborn. And the problem with that is that we become so focused and fixated on what it is that we want. We become fixated on the thing that I believe that I should be doing and I want to do. And think of like you walk into a room through this door, but then they close the door and they turn off the lights, and you're in this room and you're like, man, I like, how do I get out of this room? And you're trying to find the door. You can't find the door you came in through. But then all of a sudden on the opposite end of the room, there's a door that's cracked with a little bit of light coming through it. And you're like, oh, that's a door. But because it wasn't the door that we came in through.
Yes.
No, I'm not
going to go through that one, right?
I'm going to go through the door, what I know. I'm going to go through what I know. And I believe that that's why people get stuck and just spin their wheels because I have just seen enough cracked doors with a little bit of light, and I've gone over there, and now I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, now I see that door and I'm like, whoa, let's go. What's out there for me? I know there's something waiting for me.
But that is conditioning. That is conditioning.
I used to kind of I still went to the door, but I would be cautious. And what I mean by that is like, that door for me in my life represents when people said that I should be a speaker. I never wanted to be a speaker. That wasn't something that was attractive to me, that I felt like I had the ability to be on a stage in front of 5 people, let alone 30,000 people in some instances. Like, I never thought that I had the gift to do that. And yet I went through that door and look, I discovered that, oh no, I could do this and I actually enjoy it. The door of when people say, hey, why don't you audition? Yeah, well, yeah, like when people, too much sometimes. But when someone said, why don't you audition to become an actor on a soap opera? I've never wanted to be an actor. I never had any acting experience, but I went through the door. When there was a door in the room and someone said, hey, why don't you go on dancing? And
let's talk about Dancing with the Stars, because that was my next question. How did that crack happen? How did that get set up?
All right. So you want to hear the story? So this is me paying attention to everything that happens around me. So when I was on All My Children, I remember that we did a fan event one time, and I was one of the newer actors on the show. So I didn't get a lot of the questions from the fans. They're going to the more seasoned actors as they should. And one lady one time asked me, she said, would you ever go on Dancing with the Stars? And now, mind you, there's like around this weekend, there's like parties and all this stuff. And God knows I was probably on the dance floor doing some crazy stuff. So that's probably what prompted her to ask me that question. But I didn't remember it in the moment. In the moment, I was just like, yeah, sure. Yeah, it'd be fun, blah, blah, blah. Right. I just kind of didn't put a lot of thought into it. I was just like kind of like blowing it off. Well, needless to say, a couple of years later, All My Children announced that they were going to cancel the show later that year. And as the news went, viral about the show ending after 40 some odd years, I had a few people reach out to me and they're like, oh man, we're sorry to hear about that. But one friend said, hey man, whatever happened with that Dancing with the Stars thing? And I was like, why does that keep coming up? So what I did, instead of ignoring it, I went and talked to the producer of All My Children, who is a dear friend of ours. And I said, hey, I keep hearing people ask me about Dancing with the Stars. I don't know why they keep mentioning that. What are your thoughts? And she's like, oh my God, you'd be amazing on that show. So she set up a meeting because she knew the casting director. So she set up a meeting, and literally I went to the meeting and they were like, okay, cool. And then literally they asked me to be on the show like a month later. But again, that never would have happened had I not paid attention to the very thing that that lady who
I love that analogy. Yes.
That lady is. I don't know what that lady's name is. I don't know where she lives. I don't know what. I don't know. But that doesn't matter. It's the fact that I took the advice of some lady and just kind of kept it in my mind. And then when they kept resurfacing, I was like, okay, I can't just ignore this and think of it as a coincidence. I have to lean in on some level. And listen, going on that show, people thought, okay, here's a good story of a disabled veteran. Here's a good story of a burned victim. And over the course of the 10 weeks of being on that show, I was able to show people that I'm not a disabled
veteran.
I'm a veteran. That I'm not a burned victim. I'm a burned survivor.
And I love that. Change the narrative. Yes.
And reclaim my identity and tell people who I was versus waiting for people to decide and tell me who they thought I was.
Okay. Well, that was really my question. What was the message? So you just answered it. Well, you didn't just go and Dancing with the Stars. You bloody won. So how did that happen? How did you go from doing nothing but dancing to winning?
Let me tell you something. It takes a lot of vulnerability. I think that's the key word. You have to be vulnerable. And what I mean in that regard is that, listen, it's hard to be somebody as a contestant and not have any training and put yourself in that environment, right? Male or female, like it's hard. I think in this way, it's a little bit harder for guy contestants. And this is what I mean. You have guys that come onto the show and listen, I'm a dude and I know how I could be and I know how some of my friends can be. I'm not saying all guys are like this, but we get so caught up in like, we know what we should be doing. We know how to do this. We know how to do that. And when you're on that show as a man and you got your female partner who is an expert in this space and she is telling you, get it together. When she's telling you, you can't get all upset about that. You can't get defensive about that. You can't say, well, you can't tell me. No, you have to say, got it. And so there's a
follower, not a leader here.
Yes. And and trusting this individual. So you have to be vulnerable in that way. You also have to be willing to be vulnerable on the show. For me, it's like I went on that show and I just showed who I was. And I think that's what people connected with. Even if people have never been through the same adversity that I've been through, they can relate to a feeling of some similar circumstance in their own life. They can relate to, I remember being in this spot in my life when I felt, I felt that things were out of control and I felt like I lost my identity and I felt like this and I felt like that. Oh, I can relate to him because of that feeling. And then listen, somebody said to me, and I gotta do the homework on this, but somebody said to me, I think it's a book or it's a lecture, I forget what it is, but there's something out there in the world where someone talks about how your environment can change your DNA. And why that was fascinating to me when this person mentioned it, and the reason it clicked for me immediately was because when I was a kid, that same man that put his hands on my mom would always play the piano in our house, and he would sing Spanish love songs. And I would come sit next to him, and because Spanish was my first language, and I would sing those same songs with him. And sometimes he would take me to a bar, and like this really small, play the piano, and I would be there with the microphone singing and dancing these Spanish love songs, and you would have all these people that are pretty heavily intoxicated, like, it's so great. But yet my environment, as I kept growing up,
that's interesting,
to take away a little bit of that joy and that personality. Dancing with the Stars gave me the opportunity to tap back into the person I've always been, which I've always been this person that is like, put me on a stage, I'll do it, whatever it is.
That lady saw that in you, which is why she mentioned it.
Yeah,
so you're dropping a lot of nuggets here. Yeah,
and so
be open to the universe. Yes,
yeah, 100%. And so And so, and then also too is like whoever you are at, or maybe in depending on kind of how life is shaking out right now, depending who you were, remember that person. Never let that person go. Never let that person die, because maybe at this point in your life, that person is not able to completely come out, but over time there will be the right setting that space is going to allow for that person to come back in.
Wow.
And then you're going to be who you've always intended to be. But you have to be true to yourself and know who you are. And I went on that show, man, and I danced my little ass off. And this tells you how comfortable I was. So right before the first dance of the show, my partner and I, Karina Smirnoff, who is, I mean, awesome, we're standing in front of each other, and they're announcing, dancing the Viennese waltz, J.R Martinez and his partner, Karina, right? He's doing a little accent. And so Karina looks at me, and she looks at me, she goes like this, like, here we go, like, here, it's happening, this is the moment. And I looked at her like this, and this is literally what I did. I went,
I got this.
And I did my first dance, and people were like, whoa, this dude can dance. Hold on. This dude might be a guy that's going to be at until the very end.
Right.
That was my DNA. I've always been this person. And so you just got to stay true to who you are, know who you are. It'll work in the right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's amazing. All right. So let's talk about your book. Your book is called Full of Heart, My Story of Survival, Strength, and Spirit. Now, why did you write it, and what do you hope readers to walk away with? And talk about heart, because in our conversation today, I don't think we got there. Why would you say you're full of heart?
So, there was a lot of titles tossed around, and that was the one that kept coming back. It actually wasn't one that I was a fan of. It was actually the publisher, my publicist, and a lot of other people were fans of it. And I was like, why full of heart? And I was like, because, man, like everything you do, you lead with your heart. Right. And the more I heard it, the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, I guess, right? You just never stop and think about yourself in that way. And I had to do it. And so then I was like, oh, I like the title. I get it now. Now, why did I write the book? I wrote the book because, again, I wanted to give people more depth and understanding how I was able to overcome the things that I had to deal with in the military, how I was able to create the life that I've created for myself since then. But I wanted to tell like those little details as far as like we talked about earlier, the first 19 years of my life, and allow people to understand and see a little bit of themselves and their own journeys and say, oh, wow, I've had a similar challenge. I've had to go through these little things. I've had to do this, do that. Okay, you know what? And then reframe the way you look at that adversity. And instead of looking at it as like, oh, God, it sucks and life is against me, you reframe it and you say, you know what? It's preparing me for something. It's preparing me for something. And so I just wanted to reframe and give people more details and context to who I am and what my life is and what it was. And hopefully in the sense that people take that away from the book and from the story. So I'm in a very different place now than I was when I wrote that book 10 years ago. But nonetheless, I'm in a space now where I feel like it's time for me to start sitting down and writing because I've hit a completely new stage of life.
Yes. That's amazing. Wow. Yes. I now see the title Full of Heart. And of course, every word on there is important. You're a survivor. You have strength and spirit. That's the light.
Amito bar.
All right. Yes. I haven't heard that term, but I'm going to look that up. All right. So listen, J.R., this has been a fantastic conversation. You know, I love the depths of our story, where we went with that. And you're right. We're not just talking about that day when your world changed. You're talking about before and the after and things in between. And how somebody that has gone through, an incident where they think that their life is over, right? And I love what you said about when I'm thinking that, I'll be glad that I'm alive. And you're saying, well, no, I'm not glad I'm alive because now I don't know what alive is going to look like. but I'm glad that I can walk and I have range of motion and, and I can help someone else and talk and be an encouragement. And so that's beautiful. I love that. Look at the micro things and, and I do a gratitude meditation. I got that from Louis Hayes. And, they're saying that when you're in gratitude, you can never be depressed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally different energy.
Yep.
So I'm very glad that we were able to touch on those things. So I know that you've got a hard stop. So tell our listeners where they can pick up a copy of your book and, following you on social media. Do you have a website? That kind of thing.
Well, Myrna, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for inviting me to be on your show, allowing me to be on and sharing me with your audience. You've created a platform, and I know that it's not easy to just share, your audience with other people. You want to be careful and cautious. So thank you for trusting me to come on the show. I've enjoyed the conversation with you as well. And, obviously we'll revisit it down the road, but, at the interim, I just want to say for anybody that feels like they're curious and they want to learn a little bit more about myself, or they want to maybe engage in a conversation, whether it's a question that you have, or I didn't really kind of give an answer to something that we discussed here today, I'd say hit me up on social media. I am J.R. Martinez. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I don't really do the TikTok thing. I like to watch everybody else do the dancing, but I'm not really doing the dancing anymore, So I encourage everyone to hit me up on Instagram or Facebook. But if you want to, do a deeper dive, you can always go to my website, jrmartinez.com. But I look forward to connecting with you guys. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure today, and wish you guys the best.
Yes, thank you, JR. Listen, I was very incredibly excited to talk to you because, again, I love stories of survival. I love stories of people have, hit the wall and come through the other end. And because that's basically what we do here. We're trying to encourage someone. Life is full of adversity, and almost all of us go through challenges, and some challenges knock people down, which is why the Bible says it's not how many times you get knocked down, but how many times you get up. And your story, the fact that you've got so much light, you've got so much energy, you've got so much joy, you're not even thinking of it that day anymore.
Exactly.
So, an afterthought.
Yep, absolutely. 100%.
Yes, I agree. All right, guys, listen, thank you for tuning in to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life. This was a transformational conversation. If you're watching this on iTunes, we'd love for you to, rate and review and also subscribe, because I want to bring you quality guests like JR every week. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd love for you to leave a comment, maybe encourage JR in his journey, maybe, talk about something that you have come through, and of course, hit that subscribe button. So JR, thanks again. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until next time, namaste.